Hello, everyone, and welcome to Body Bags. I'll be your reviewer for today. I'm Lonnie from Horror Heaven77, and as you can tell, the theme, I guess you could say, for this week, we're doing horror films from 1971. And I know this might seem a little bit weird to everybody, because you see by the title of the video, the movie that I'm reviewing is Stanley Kubrick's Clockwork Orange. So I know this is probably going to be jarring to some people. Who are going to be like, well, that's not really a horror movie, but it's interesting, and this one stuck out to me because when I was doing research, I was checking on Google, looking up horror movies that came out in 1971. This movie came up on the list, and it got me curious. It got me really wanting to talk about it because this is a movie that basically horror surrounds all of this movie from the creation of the novel to the film and to what happened after the film came out, and even some of the subject matter of the film. I just thought it would be really interesting to talk about this movie. I'm sure everybody's already seen it, but the story stars Malcolm McDowell, directed by the late great Stanley Kubrick. The movie stars Malcolm McDowell as Alex DeLarge, and the movie opens. You got that famous shot of him with his gang, but he calls them Droogs, Pete, Georgie, and Dim, and they're getting ready to go out for a night, and then the first thing they do is they encounter an old tramp, kind of like in a kind of like an alleyway or something like that, or like an underpass kind of a thing. And the man's drunk, and he's asking if they have any money to spare, and they you know you know you know Alex, he takes his cane and jabs him in the stomach, and he's talking about he doesn't want to live because of how old people are treated in the world. And so they all just go in and just start beating this poor man nearly to death. Then we and we're leading up to the first 30 minutes of the movie are really the most intense part of the movie, because then we see Alex and his gang come across another gang. This gang is getting ready to rape a woman, and then they stop that. And so at first you're thinking, okay, well, maybe maybe Alex and his gang, they don't condone rape, which we find out very soon that's not the case. So they beat up this other gang, and then they steal a sports car, and they're out, driving in the country and things like that. And then we come across probably the most disturbing, haunting scene in the whole movie is where Alex and his gang invade a home with a writer played by Patrick. I can talk, I swear. Played by Patrick Magee, who you might remember from Amicus films like Asylum and Tales from the Crypt and things like that. And his wife, Adrian Corey, and they just beat the husband merciless, and they take turns raping the woman and stuff like that. Well, anyway, at one point, Alex's gang decides they're getting fed up with the way that he's running the group, and he decides no, he doesn't want to give up leadership. And Georgie talks about, there's this place that we can break into. There's a lot of money there. It's like a health farm, a fitness farm, and there's this old lady there that lives with her cats and all this stuff, and she's got all this money, and so we could go there. And so, but Alex decides he's going to go in on his own, and so he goes in, and it's a very darkly comic scene because the woman is working out. She does have cats everywhere, but the room that she's working in, there's so much sexual artwork on the walls, and she has this giant plaster phallus that's meant to be kind of like an art piece that she uses for decoration. So Alex goes in there, and he taunts the woman, and then so she decides she's going to attack him, and so she's she takes like a bust, and she's like swinging it at him and trying to defend herself, and at one point she does hit him, and he falls to the floor, and then he manages to pull her feet out from under her, and then he jumps up, grabs this giant phallus, and basically smashes her head in with it. And at this point, his gang is Droogs. They've had enough of him, and so Alex comes outside, and they take a milk bottle, smash him across the face with it, and then they leave him to pretty much be picked up by the cops. Well, Alex, it turns out he's been basically he's been kind of like in and out of like juvie hall, kind of a thing. And so it turns out that the woman that he attacked has died, and so he's going to jail. He's going to be tried for murder. He's going to jail. So he does go to jail, and then in jail he's reading the Bible. He's like trying to find an angle that he can play that will get him out of jail fast. And at one point he decides, well, I want to go ahead and act all religious, and I want to work in the church and all this other kind of stuff, because if they see that, maybe my sentence will be reduced for good behavior. And it's like, but you can tell it's all an act for him, because like he's reading the Bible at one point. You see images in his head where he's fantasizing about he's the one crucifying Christ, and he's killing so many people and having all this sex with women and stuff like that. And he talks to the Reverend about, he's heard of this new treatment that the government is talking about doing, where if you get this treatment, that it keeps you from committing violent acts, and that you'll get out of prison early, and then you'll never go back again. And he decides he wants to apply for this technique. But of course, the Reverend is telling him, like, hey, goodness needs to come from within, and you need to want to be good. You need to want to aspire to do good and to help people and things like that. That's how it's going to come about. It's like there's no kind of like quick, easy fix that's just going to do all, just undo everything. Well, so the government, they come to the prison that he's in, and at one point they're all standing out in the courtyard, and they're looking at some of the jail cells, and they're walking along, and Alex makes it a point to make himself known to this official, this government official, and he does, and so they talk to him, and they decide that he's going to be the one to go for this treatment to try to rehabilitate him. And so he goes to this clinic, and the doctor is actually played by Barbara Shelley. You remember from Hammer films like Dracula, Prince of Darkness, and things like that. And so they start injecting him with a serum of some kind, and then they clamp him down in these, in a restraint jacket, and he's got like these clamps on his eyes, and he's watching movies about Nazis, and he's watching rape films and basically like snuff films and things like this. And the more they inject this stuff in him, and the more he watches, the more he starts getting really sick, and he's getting horrified, and he's getting weak, and it's freaking him out, and everything, and he can't understand why he's having these problems with violence and everything else. But it continues on. He goes through the therapy, and even though he freaks out a number of times and stuff, but he gets through it all, and then he's released from jail. And then he goes home, and he finds out karma is a bitch. He really does, because he goes home, and then he finds out that his mother and father have rented out his room to a lodger, and when he says he wants to have his room back, they decide they don't want him living with them. And so basically now he has no home. And so he goes out, and he's walking along, and he comes across, of all people, he comes across the old tramp that he nearly beat to death at the beginning of the movie. And the old tramp asks him for some money. He gives him a little bit of money, but then the tramp recognizes him, and then, he's trying to get away. But see, you got to understand, though, now he can't fight back. He's conditioned to where now he cannot fight back. He can't defend himself. He can't do, if he tries to even raise his fist, he's going to be, completely sick and just horrified. He can't fight back in any way. So this bum and a bunch of his friends decide that they're gonna pretty much jolly stomp the hell out of him, like him and his pals did to this old man at the beginning of the movie. So so then a couple of police officers come to break the whole thing up, and then of all people, it turns out that the two police officers are actually Dim and Georgie. It turns out that they're like, well, we grew up, and basically we took jobs, and one of the places that was hiring, we decided to go work for was the police department. So now we're cops. And so they handcuff Alex. They take him away. They take him out to the middle of nowhere, and you know, there's like an old kind of like water trough thing, and they take him out there, and they stick his head under water, and they almost beat him to death, and almost drown him because he's in there for a long time. But they finally decide to let up on him. And so Alex, now he's all disoriented, and he's trying to, find some place to go and everything. And he comes across a house. But hey, guess what? It turns out it's the house of the husband and wife that, he and his gang, assaulted and violated at the beginning of the movie. The biggest downside is, though, is that unfortunately the wife died. And then the writer now is basically he's handicapped, and he has a caretaker, and not ironically, but interestingly enough, the caretaker is actually played by David Prowse, who, if you're in the know, you know that David Prowse, was the actor, in the suit, who played Darth Vader in the Star Wars movies, at least in the original trilogy. Of course, we all know James Earl Jones. James Earl Jones did the voice, but David Prowse was the one who always wore the Darth Vader costume in the three films. So, um, so at first they don't recognize him, and he's all like, "Okay, Alex is like, okay, this is good because he's not going to recognize me because we had masks on that night, so he can't identify me." But at one point, he's taking a bath, and he starts Singing in the Rain, which was the song that he was singing when he raped the man's wife and beat him and everything. And so the man just basically, Patrick Magee's character just snaps. And so, you know, um, they decide to torture Alex, and, so Alex tries to, he tries to kill himself. And I think, I can't really go too much more. I think I've already gone too far enough with what the movie's about, without giving out. I don't want to give away the way it ends or anything for, in case anybody hasn't seen it, but I think I'm pretty safe to say, if you're watching this video, chances are pretty damn good you've already seen the movie and you already know what it's about. So, but anyway, so the movie does have some very unsettling moments to it, and it's a great film. I highly recommend it. If you're a fan of if you just want something that's different and unique and something that really is its own film, Clockwork Orange is definitely for that. And every element in this movie works. The music is great. Of course, it's Kubrick, so it's a beautifully photographed movie. It's got images in there that will stick in your head forever. Um, Malcolm McDowell, who's done like well over 100 like movie and TV appearances and stuff. This is, I think we all know that, this is always going to be the biggest thing that he's been remembered for, or that he's going to be remembered for. And, for a movie that originally wasn't billed, like I said, wasn't billed as a horror film when it first came out, actually ultimately did become embraced by the horror community. One good example is definitely Rob Zombie, because Rob Zombie uses the style and aesthetics of Clockwork Orange for his music video "Never Gonna Stop the Red Red Groovy," which, if you watch the movie or you read the book of Clockwork Orange, Groovy is well, the writer Anthony Burgess, when he wrote the book, he created a language for the characters to speak, and it's called Nastat. And and there were different words, because so the word groovy would mean like blood, so they said, so there are times where like Malcolm McDowell will say, "Oh, here comes the red red groovy," and which means, here comes the blood. Or, he'll say something like, "I have a pain in the Gulliver," which means, I have a headache, things like that. So he created a whole different language, and it's definitely in the book, it's definitely in the movie and things like that. But so yeah, Rob Zombie used that, for his song, and used Clockwork Orange as a total inspiration for his video, for "Never Gonna Stop the Red Red Groovy." Also, too, that's pretty much the main reason why Rob Zombie turned around and put Malcolm McDowell in 3 of his movies: Halloween, H2, and 31. So because Rob Zombie is a huge fan of Clockwork Orange and has been very inspired by it. But um, but yeah, a lot of horror really does surround this story and the writing of the book. As a matter of fact, okay, like the whole inspiration for Anthony Burgess to write the book was because one of his wives was she was attacked and she was raped, and he wrote the book as a he wrote it as sort of like a therapy, a catharsis, for him to get it out of him. And then um, unfortunately, as the years went by, and the book became popular, the movie came out, became popular, and then stories came out about young gangs or young young stalkers or whatever else. They would go and attack people and hurt people or kill people or whatever else, and they would always say that they were inspired by Clockwork Orange, and so that was something that Burgess had to live with for the rest of his life. Was the fact that this story that he created had such an impact, and that people were using it. Some would say as an excuse, but some were saying, but most people would say like there were so many cases, especially in the UK, of like nuns being raped, schoolgirls being raped, people being attacked, home invasions, things like this, and it all comes from the fact that Burgess wrote this book and then Kubrick turned around and made the movie out of it. So that was a nightmare for Burgess, who he didn't even consider the book even one of his better stories. He thought he had written much better stories than this. But and then when the movie was made and the movie came out, and really just kind of and it was interesting because in this case Stanley Kubrick pretty faithfully adapts the book, whereas like The Shining he completely goes in an almost opposite direction from the book. But this movie does follow the book pretty close. But there is one thing that a lot of people were upset with, was that the UK edition of the book had the original printing of the UK edition had a final chapter where basically at the end of the story, Alex decides, he does not want to be violent anymore. He takes it upon himself to not want to be violent, to hurt anybody anymore. And, it's not the government that does it. It's not religion that does it or anything like that. He makes the moral choice that he decides he doesn't want to be violent anymore, and he just wants to be a good member of society. And that part was not in the movie, because Kubrick read the American version of the book, which didn't have the final ending in it. So the movie kind of ends with um, a very dark kind of just kind of not twist ending, but kind of a creepy ending, in the sense that Alex seems like he doesn't learn anything, and he's just going to go on being this horrible character. Even though he is entertaining to watch, and that's one of the things though too that's really hard about this movie is, Malcolm McDowell, who does a great job, but he's playing this horrible character who does all these horrible things, and yet he's entertaining, and it's kind of hard for us because we're watching him be this horrible character, and we're actually kind of entertained by him. We're kind of actually pulled in by him. Um, but so anyway, so the movie has more of a bleak ending, where the book had that final ending, which was kind of more of a better wrap up, more of a lighter wrap up than what the movie and the original book had. And then after the movie came out, like I said, there were people going around saying all these, saying they did these horrible things, like they would go out and attack people, or women would be raped, or people would be killed, or something. And then, when they asked them, why did you do this? They would say they were inspired by Clockwork Orange. And so, that played a heavy part in it. And then, from my understanding, Stanley Kubrick himself ended up encountering like stalkerish type people even so much as coming up to his front door. And then when he talked to the cops explained to him that, hey, like, here's the thing, like, you see, your movie is inciting acts of violence. It's inspiring people to commit acts of violence. And here's the thing, you live out here in a country home in the middle of nowhere. You have your wife, you have your daughters. It's like, the droogs can show up at your door too, like they say in the documentary, the bonus documentary. And so Kubrick decided that, what, I'm not going to do this anymore. So he ended up pulling the movie. And even though the movie's been available for years in other countries, here in the U.S., we've always had very, pretty fair access to it. And But yeah, he had banned the movie in the UK, and the movie never showed again until after Kubrick passed away. So that kind of gives you an idea of, this movie is, even though it's not super bloody, it's not super gory. This movie is strong sauce though. It's an intense movie, but a lot of dark humor in it. It's definitely got some disturbing, unsettling images to it, and you can kind of see when you watch the movie. It's like it's not hard to see how the horror community has come to embrace this movie and how it's become this, how it is considered a horror film. Even though like Kubrick never intended for it to be a horror film, the movie definitely does have horror elements to it. It's very unsettling, very disturbing, but it's very entertaining. It's very well made. This movie is going to stick with you, and I think that's kind of the biggest thing about it. Is this movie is going to stick with you. Malcolm McDowell's performance is going to stick with you. The cinematography, everything in this movie. There are images, like I said, there are going to be images in your head once you watch this movie. You're not going to forget it. And that's a definite thing. But anyway, so yeah, I would definitely say check out A Clockwork Orange, and I think when you see like like it very much is a human horror story in a lot of ways. So yeah, I think you could understand why I would go ahead and pick this movie to review for 1971, and I think you also see too why you watch this movie, you'll see why the horror community has come to embrace it, and you see like right there, he's got like the eyeball with a little bit of blood on his that he's wearing is like a cufflink and stuff, and you see him with the knife there, and he looks really sinister everything. So yeah, so I would definitely say if you haven't already, yeah, do yourself a favor. If you want to see a really, really great film, a really unique film, then yeah, definitely watch Stanley Kubrick's Clockwork Orange. And as a matter of fact, Grace, she's, she hasn't seen the movie yet. She hasn't read the book yet, and that's kind of the thing. It's like I don't know if she ever will get around to it because her whole thing is she wants to read the book first, then see the movie. So we'll see. I don't know. She may get around to it. She may not. We'll see what happens. But so anyway, that's it. So if anybody took the time to watch this, I thank you for doing it. I appreciate you for doing it. I'm sorry that the video went on so long. Um, if you liked the video, please go ahead and leave it a like. If you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the Body Bags channel. We have a different reviewer, one for every day of the week. I'm the Friday reviewer. We have different guys. Everybody's always doing great stuff. And, we got fun theme weeks and interesting, we do label weeks and everything else. So, yeah, please come back and check us out. And that's it. Have a good night, and I'll see you later.